Captain Olivia Vale stood before the massive window of her office, her eyes tracing the movement of ships as they docked at the United Nations intergalactic headquarters. It was an unspoken truth. Humans had made it. Earth, once a fractured world, now stood proudly as a beacon of peace and progress in the galaxy. For all its history of wars and destruction, humanity had learned, adapted, and evolved. They had proven that peace wasn't a naive dream but a hard-won reality. Olivia wasn't the type to boast about humanity's accomplishments, but she couldn't deny the pride that welled up when she watched representatives from distant star systems arrive on Earth. There was something profound about the thought that the human race, once divided by borders and ideologies, now served as the bridge between civilizations that spanned light years. The Federation of Free Worlds, the Zlathar, Accord, and the Ares Union all looked to Earth for guidance, and that was why Captain Olivia Vale, at only 32, had been entrusted with one of the most difficult jobs in existence, diplomat to the galaxy. She was known for her pragmatism, her calm in the face of chaos, and above all, her unshakable belief in humanity's potential to unite with the stars. As she looked out into the bustling city below, she wasn't thinking about the politics of the summit that would begin tomorrow. She was thinking about something else, something that gnawed at her peace. Her terminal chimed with a low buzz, signaling a message. She walked over and sat at her desk, fingers lightly grazing the holographic screen as she activated it. "Captain Vale," the voice of her superior echoed from the speaker. "We've received a transmission from the Zilthar." At the mention of the Zilthar, Olivia's pulse quickened. The Zilthar were an enigmatic and deeply intelligent species, known for their neutrality and commitment to diplomacy. Their sudden contact wasn't just unexpected, it was unheard of. "They're requesting a meeting, but there's an issue." The voice on the terminal crackled. "It's encrypted and it's threatening." The year was 2145. Earth had come a long way since the days when it was a fractured, struggling planet, its nations vying for dominance. In the past century, humanity had transcended its old ways, propelling itself into the stars and establishing peaceful relations with alien species across the galaxy. Earth was now a major player in the Interstellar Council, a coalition of species working to prevent war and promote unity across the universe. The summit that would take place in just a few hours was meant to be another peaceful assembly, a chance for leaders of various star systems to come together and strengthen alliances, discuss trade, and share knowledge. But as Olivia sat in her office, contemplating the strange transmission from the Zilthar, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She'd been to countless summits before, each one a carefully choreographed dance of diplomacy. Humans were not the most powerful species in the galaxy, but they were without question the most adaptable. It was that very adaptability, the ability to learn, to survive, and to thrive in the face of adversity, that had made Earth so valuable to the galactic community. Earth's representatives had been key in diffusing countless conflicts, but now the question loomed. Could humanity's resilience protect them from an alien species they thought they knew? Olivia's fingers hovered over the terminal's control panel. The Zilthar's transmission was still encrypted, but it had a message that, once deciphered, sent a chill through her. The message wasn't just a request for peace talks. It was a declaration, a warning, and it spoke of an invasion. Humanity. The transmission echoed in a cryptic yet chilling tone. "The Zilthar now declare their intentions. Our civilization will not yield to your interference. Prepare yourselves for domination. The galaxy will be ours." Olivia blinked, disbelief settling over her. The Zilthar, a race known for centuries of peace and cooperation, were threatening to invade. It didn't make sense. She quickly brought up a series of files on the Zilthar, a race known for their intellectual prowess, their complex communication, and their strange but peaceful ways. Their language was vastly different from anything humans had encountered before, based on intricate patterns of sound and light. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was their unpredictability. The Zilthar didn't speak in the same way humans did. Their cultural norms were alien, and their methods of communication, gestures, sounds, and even smells were things humans could never fully grasp. If this transmission was indeed from the Zilthar, there could only be one explanation: a terrible misunderstanding. But the stakes were too high. The consequences of a diplomatic failure could mean war with one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, Captain. The voice from the terminal continued. What do you want us to do? Olivia felt the weight of the decision pressing on her. She wasn't just a diplomat. She was humanity's best hope to prevent another war. A war this time against a species far more advanced than Earth could ever dream of becoming. The pressure was immense, but she had only one choice. Prepare my team. We're going to the Zilthar. As Olivia prepared to leave her office, her mind raced with the implications of what was to come. The Zilthar had never given any indication of hostility. The very idea that they were preparing for war was unimaginable. Yet the transmission spoke of nothing less. Her thoughts were interrupted by the hum of her communicator. Aiden Roth is requesting a meeting, Captain, her assistant said, the voice crackling through her comm. Send him in, Olivia replied, her voice cold and focused. Aiden Roth, the head military strategist for Earth's defense forces, was never far from her side during times of crisis. A career soldier, he was pragmatic and always ready for battle, even when diplomacy was the better route. But Olivia trusted him. They had fought together in past skirmishes, even if they had never seen eye to eye on how to handle the Zilthar. Aiden stepped into her office, his face set in grim determination. She couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision ahead of her. We're walking a thin line, Captain, Aiden said, his eyes hard. If this transmission is legitimate, the Zilthar could wipe us out before we even knew what hit us. We need to prepare for war. We're not going to war, Olivia replied, her voice firm. We're going to figure out what went wrong. This is a misunderstanding. Aiden's gaze faltered, but only for a moment. He was a soldier, trained to face threats head-on, not to waste time seeking out the nuances of alien diplomacy. But he knew Olivia, and he knew her belief in humanity's ability to overcome impossible odds. He didn't agree with her methods, but he respected her vision. We'll need more than words to stop this, Captain. I hope you're right. I am, Olivia said, standing up and walking toward the door. Humanity has always found a way. We'll find it again. The transmission from the Zilthar had been only the beginning. What had initially seemed like a cryptic and isolated warning now exploded into an avalanche of encrypted signals, each one carrying a more aggressive tone than the last. Earth's leaders, along with Captain Olivia Vale, had barely begun to decipher the first message when a second followed, and then a third. The words, once incoherent, now formed a pattern that became clearer with each passing hour. There was no mistaking it. The Zilthar were making a declaration of war. At first, there had been hope that the transmissions were misinterpreted. Olivia and her team worked around the clock, digging through layers of alien code, trying to unlock the meaning of the Zilthar's cryptic symbols. But then, the situation escalated. Captain Vale, the voice of her superior, came through the comm. Link. The Zilthar have just sent another signal. They're calling it the final warning. I need an immediate response. Olivia's stomach tightened. The idea that this could be a misunderstanding, the hope that this was just some cultural misstep, was slipping away with each passing minute. The Zilthar, known for their peaceful nature and advanced civilization, couldn't have just suddenly decided to attack. But their words were unmistakable, and the sheer power behind their communication was impossible to ignore. I'm gathering a team now. Prepare the diplomatic delegation, Olivia said. Her voice, though steady, held the weight of the impending storm. She didn't know what to expect, but one thing was certain: Earth's fate was hanging by a thread, and she was the one holding it. The gathering at the United Nations intergalactic headquarters was more chaotic than Olivia had ever seen it. Every species, from the towering Androsians to the tiny Vrexians, had representatives here, each one equally concerned about what the Zilthar's sudden hostility meant for the galaxy's fragile peace. Olivia moved briskly through the hallways, her mind racing. Her role as the diplomat had never felt more daunting, and as much as she tried to maintain composure, doubt gnawed at her. Was humanity truly ready for this? Could they survive in a galaxy full of species far more advanced, more powerful, more ruthless than anything Earth had ever known? The Earth's response was crucial. Captain Vale had worked tirelessly to ensure that Earth's military wasn't the first response. Diplomacy, human diplomacy, was supposed to be the way. But how much of that could hold against the vast reach of a technologically superior species? Olivia. Aiden Roth's voice cut through her thoughts as he caught up to her, his usual confident demeanor replaced by an unmistakable edge of anxiety. We're sending our best diplomats, but how can we be sure this isn't a trap? If the Zilthar's transmissions are legitimate, what happens then? Olivia paused, her hand tightening around the datapad in her palm. Aiden was a military strategist, a pragmatist always seeking the quickest solution. And while her belief in diplomacy had always kept her grounded, she knew Aiden's instincts were sharp, maybe even sharper than her own. We take the risk, Aiden. If we don't try to understand their motives now, we'll be fighting a war with an enemy we don't even understand. She looked up at him, her face set in determination. We can't afford to be hasty. Our survival depends on this. But even as she spoke those words, a gnawing sense of fear lingered. What if they were too late? What if the Zilthar had already decided that humanity was an obstacle to their plans? The team assembled in the main chamber, the diplomatic room, was quiet, tense. Olivia sat at the head of the table, flanked by her key advisors. Aiden stood, off to the side, arms crossed, his face etched with concern. Every member of the team had been chosen for their experience with alien cultures, and yet, all of them felt helpless in the face of the Zilthar's cryptic messages. No one could have predicted this. We've gone over the data 100 times, Captain, Dr. Yasmin Talbot, a cultural expert, said. The symbols, the language, everything. The Zilthar's message, every signal they've sent. It's all leading us toward one conclusion. They're preparing for something, but we're not sure what. Olivia nodded slowly. The aggression is unlike anything we've encountered before. But this is a misunderstanding. It has to be. Dr. Talbot's eyes were heavy with doubt. What if it's not? What if the Zilthar have decided we're no longer useful to them? Olivia's mind raced as she looked over the data again. There was something unsettling about the Zilthar's tone, a precision that suggested control, not panic. These were not the actions of a species that was threatening to invade. They were the actions of a species that felt cornered. But why? The Zilthar are renowned for their communication methods. They don't use violence to resolve conflict. We know this, Olivia said, her voice unwavering. But their concept of conflict resolution, it could be completely different from ours. And then, just as the weight of the situation seemed to press the team into silence, the answer became clear. It wasn't war the Zilthar were preparing for. It was a gift. Olivia had always believed that the greatest strength of humanity was its adaptability. But even she had underestimated the complexity of the alien species they had come to rely on. The aggression was a series of highly advanced communications. What had been interpreted as a hostile move was, in reality, an attempt to offer a transformative technology. The Zilthar had been trying to provide humanity with a powerful tool, one that would bridge the communication gap between species, but it had been misread as an act of domination. We're in danger of making the same mistake we always make, Olivia murmured. Assuming that the Zilthar think like us. The room was silent as the weight of her words settled over the team. The invasion wasn't a threat at all. It was a gift that had been misunderstood, miscommunicated, and misinterpreted. But the damage had already been done. Humanity had already prepared itself for a war that never needed to happen. Worse still, this misunderstanding was pushing the galaxy to the brink of disaster. If the Zilthar saw Earth as a threat, their peaceful intentions would collapse under the weight of misunderstanding. We need to act fast, Olivia said, rising from her chair. We need to contact the Zilthar, explain the miscommunication, and hope we can prevent the war we've already started. The tension in the room was palpable, but Olivia's resolve remained unbroken. She knew that the path to peace wouldn't be easy, But humanity had survived before, and it would survive again. This time, however, the stakes were higher than they had ever been. The future of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy, was at risk. The tension in the command room had reached a breaking point. Every minute that passed without a resolution was a step closer to a full-blown galactic conflict. The Zilthar's signals had become more aggressive, their cryptic transmissions now carrying an unmistakable urgency. A deep sense of foreboding settled over Captain Olivia Vale as she reviewed the latest message. "This isn't just a misunderstanding anymore," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else in the room. "They're pushing us toward war." Her hands gripped the edge of the table as she looked at the holographic display, the alien symbols flickering before her eyes. The message was clearer than ever, and yet its meaning was still shrouded in mystery. Earth was under threat, or so it seemed. The Zilthar, once peaceful allies, had now sent a final demand. Prepare for war or face extinction. "We need to decipher this," she said, more forcefully now. "We need to find out why they're doing this before it's too late." Behind her, Aiden Roth leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his eyes sharp with frustration. "We don't have much time, Captain. The Vorg are already moving into position. If we don't act fast, the Zilthar may not be the only ones we have to worry about." The Vorg, their long-standing rivals, had long held a hostile view of humanity. While the Zilthar had been allies, the Vorg were waiting for the smallest slip-up to provoke an all-out war. Now, with Earth on the brink of conflict, the Vorg were ready to take advantage. Olivia knew that the clock was ticking. Every second counted. Yet her thoughts kept returning to the same painful truth. The Zilthar had once been allies, but now they seemed determined to tear everything apart. "We can't afford to make the wrong move here," she said, turning to face her team. "We need to understand the Zilthar's message before we respond. If we misinterpret this, we risk everything." Aiden Roth was a man of action, his military background always urging him toward decisive steps. But Captain Vale had learned over the years that diplomacy was often the key to survival, and Aiden had always struggled with that aspect. Their partnership had been tested more than once, and now, with the entire galaxy hanging in the balance, their differences were more pronounced than ever. "I understand your position," Olivia said, her voice softer than usual. "But this isn't a battle we can fight on the front lines. We need to understand the Zilthar's culture, their motives. We can't just attack." Aiden scoffed, clearly frustrated. "They're sending us threats, Vale. What part of that says diplomacy to you? They want war. We should give it to them before we're wiped out." "I'm not saying we shouldn't prepare," Olivia countered, her eyes steady. "But what if they're misunderstood? What if they're offering us something, and we're the ones pushing them into conflict?" Aiden clenched his jaw. The two of them locked in a silent battle of wills. The pressure of their strained relationship hung heavy between them, but neither was willing to back down. It wasn't just their futures on the line, it was the future of humanity itself. In the midst of this turmoil stood Kalos, the Zilthar ambassador. He was an ancient diplomat, one of the oldest living members of his species with eyes that had seen millennia pass by. Despite the rising tension, Kalos remained remarkably calm, his thoughts seemingly more collected than anyone else in the room. But even he could not hide the underlying frustration that came from the Zilthar's current position. He had seen humanity's potential for greatness, but even now there was doubt in his gaze. "I've read your messages," Kalos spoke at last, his voice deep and resonant. "And I understand the urgency of your situation, Captain Vale, but do not mistake the Zilthar for those who would be easily provoked. We have lived for millennia, learning the ways of the universe. We do not enter conflicts without purpose." Olivia turned to him, her expression filled with determination. "Then, tell me, Kalos, why are they sending us these signals? Why now, after all these years of peace?" Kalos's gaze seemed distant, as if he was searching for something buried deep within the folds of his memory. Perhaps they fear what lies beyond the stars. They are not hostile, Captain, but they do fear." And in that moment, Olivia understood. The Zilthar were caught in the web of their own paranoia, a fear of the unknown creeping into their once pristine civilization. They feared that humanity's expansion into the galaxy would disrupt their carefully balanced order. "We must act quickly," Kalos said. "The longer you wait, the more damage will be done." Olivia's mind raced. She had always believed in the potential of humanity to bring peace to the galaxy. That belief had been tested again and again, but now it was in danger of being completely shattered. Her self-doubt, the nagging fear that maybe humanity wasn't equipped to handle the vast, terrifying complexities of the universe, threatened to overwhelm her. How could she convince a species like the Zilthar that humanity was ready for peace, when Earth's future hung by a thread? How could she stand firm when it seemed like the universe was full of beings far more powerful than they? Aiden's words echoed in her mind. "We can't afford to be weak." But she knew better. Weakness wasn't humanity's flaw. It was their strength, their ability to adapt, to learn, to overcome that set them apart. Humanity had survived against all odds, and they would do it again. "I believe in humanity's potential," she whispered to herself, the words a mantra, "and I will fight for that belief." Across the room, Aiden watched her, his expression unreadable. He had always believed that military power was the answer. But seeing Olivia's resolve in the face of impending disaster began to shift something within him. The fire that had driven him for years, the need for action above all else, was beginning to flicker and dim. Maybe, just maybe, diplomacy could be the key. The sound of the emergency alarm ripped through the air, shattering the tense silence that had fallen over the room. Olivia's eyes snapped to the central console as the red warning lights flashed. "Captain, we've received an emergency signal from Colony Theta 7. Lieutenant Harris's voice came through urgently. "The Vorg have launched an attack. We need to respond now." Olivia's heart sank. Colony Theta 7 was a vital human outpost on the fringes of known space. If the Vorg were attacking, the situation was far worse than anyone had imagined. "Prepare the fleet." Aiden's voice broke through, his military instincts immediately kicking into overdrive. "We need to deploy before it's too late." But Olivia's mind raced, her thoughts jumping from the immediate threat of the Vorg to the bigger picture. A war with the Vorg would push the Zilthar further away, perhaps permanently. The diplomatic channels with Kalos would close for good. "Prepare the diplomatic team as well," Olivia said firmly, her resolve hardening. "We're not just going to fight. We're going to end this." As the team scrambled into action, Olivia turned to Aiden, meeting his gaze for a brief moment. The conflict between them was far from over, but for now, they had to work together. The stakes were too high for anything else. The tension in the war room was palpable as Captain Olivia Vale stood before the holographic projection of the Zilthar ambassador, Kalos. The air crackled with a strange mix of urgency and hope. The last few days had been nothing short of chaotic, an emotional roller coaster of misunderstandings, military mobilization, and diplomatic struggles. But now, for the first time, they had the breakthrough they needed. "We've decrypted the final portion of their message," said Lieutenant Harris, her voice filled with disbelief. "It's not an invasion, Captain. It's a gift." Olivia's mind raced, disbelief rippling through her. The Zilthar, the species they had feared were sending Earth to the brink of war, had actually been offering something that could change everything. Her hand tightened on the edge of the table as the truth began to sink in. It wasn't a threat, it was an attempt at peace. Kalos's hologram flickered before them, his eyes now filled with something close to sorrow. "I have tried to tell you, Captain, but I too feared the misunderstanding would lead to destruction. What we offer is the key to preventing further conflict, an advanced form of communication, a way to understand one another without the need for war." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. "The device," she murmured. "You've been trying to give us a way to speak without fear, without aggression." Kalos nodded slowly. "It is a means of bridging the vast distances of space, not just physically, but intellectually and emotionally. A way to see beyond your species' inherent fear of the unknown." Humanity, for all its achievements, still feared the unknown. The Zilthar, who had lived for millennia, had mastered the art of peace, but they had no way of understanding how deeply ingrained that fear was in others. It wasn't that the Zilthar had intended to dominate or enslave humanity. They had, in their own way, been trying to help. But the technology was so advanced that it was misunderstood as a weapon. They thought we would see it as a tool of control, Olivia said, her voice filled with realization. They couldn't have anticipated that we'd be afraid of something so unfamiliar. Callus's voice was thick with regret. I had hoped our history together would have been enough. But fear clouds judgment. The weight of the situation pressed down on Olivia's chest. The Zilthar had offered a gift to a species they had once trusted, and now, in a cruel twist of fate, it had almost led to their destruction. The weight of the misunderstanding, of the conflict they had narrowly avoided, pressed heavily on Olivia's mind. The clock was ticking. The Vorg were still a looming threat, waiting for any opportunity to exploit the situation. Humanity had to find a way to turn this around. Olivia paced back and forth, her mind whirring as she thought through every possibility. The Zilthar technology, this misunderstood gift, was the key. She could feel it. She could see it. I need access to the Zilthar's full communication protocols, Olivia said, turning to Kalos. I'll need to combine their technology with our own to make this work. Kalos nodded, his eyes filled with an unspoken respect for the human determination before him. I will provide you with everything you need, but you must understand, this technology is not meant for combat. It's meant for understanding. I know, Olivia replied, her voice steady. But right now, understanding is the only weapon we have. We need to use it before we lose everything. For the next several hours, Olivia and her team worked tirelessly, fusing human ingenuity with Zilthar technology. It was an impossible task. Humans had never interacted with something so advanced. But the team worked with an intensity born of desperation and hope. Aiden Roth stood by, watching as Olivia meticulously manipulated the alien systems. His usual skepticism about diplomacy and peace had been shaken by the sudden clarity of their situation. For the first time, he saw the value in cooperation, in truly understanding the other side. I didn't think we'd be able to pull this off, Aiden said quietly, his gaze focused on Olivia. But I guess that's the difference with humans, isn't it? We never stop fighting, even when it seems impossible. Olivia paused for a moment, looking up at him. It's not just about fighting, Aiden. It's about adapting, learning, and doing whatever it takes to protect what we've built. As the last component of the Zilthar communication device came online, the room fell into a heavy silence. Olivia hesitated for just a moment, but then pressed the activation sequence. The device hummed to life, sending out a wave of energy across the room. For a moment, everything felt impossibly still. Then, the first communication came through, not as a transmission, but as a feeling. Emotions, thoughts, visions, and images from the Zilthar were shared in an instant, bypassing the need for language altogether. The relief was palpable. Olivia's heart raced as she began to understand the true nature of the Zilthar's offering. It wasn't just a gift. It was a chance to create something far greater than just peace. It was a way to end fear, to end the cycle of misunderstanding that had plagued civilizations for centuries. The Vorg were not done. They had been watching from the shadows, waiting for any sign of weakness, any sign of humanity's struggle to maintain control. But now, with the Zilthar's communication technology in their hands, Olivia knew she could do more than just fight. She could reason with them. Send the signal, Olivia ordered, her voice resolute. We need to show them we understand. Aiden looked at her, a question in his eyes, but said nothing. He trusted her now, more than ever. The signal was broadcast across the stars, a clear message that humanity, with the help of the Zilthar, would not cower in fear. They would not be dragged into war by miscommunication and paranoia. Humanity had learned to adapt, and had learned to use that adaptability as their greatest strength. And the Vorg, they would have to decide. Would they fight against the tide of history, or would they stand with humanity side by side against the true threats of the galaxy? For a moment, There was silence. Then, the Zilthar responded, their voices resonating across the communication array. "We will assist you," Kalos said, his tone firm. "Together, we can repel the Vorg and ensure that peace is not a dream, but a reality." As the Zilthar and humanity stood united, the Vorg forces faltered. They had underestimated the strength of the human spirit, the determination to survive, and to protect what mattered. In the end, the peace agreement was forged with one lingering question remaining. Can humanity be trusted with such immense power? The galaxy would have to wait for an answer, but Olivia Vale knew one thing for sure. Humanity's ingenuity, adaptability, and unwavering resolve had proven that they could handle whatever the stars threw at them. The war was over, but its scars would linger. Earth had averted the conflict, but the cost was high. Human lives had been lost in the chaos, the brief but deadly skirmishes that had erupted when the Vorg sought to exploit the misunderstanding. The bodies of brave soldiers, civilians and diplomats now lay in cold graves across colonies and battlefields. Even though the peace had been secured, the price of that peace weighed heavily on those who survived. Captain Olivia Vale stood at the memorial wall, her hand resting on the smooth, cold surface. Names, thousands of names. She closed her eyes, willing herself not to break. The victory had been bittersweet. The Zilthar had agreed to assist in repelling the Vorg, but many lives had been lost before that cooperation was achieved. There was no joy in this victory, only the harsh reality of the lives sacrificed for it. She felt a presence beside her, and without opening her eyes, she knew it was Aiden Roth. The military strategist had been by her side throughout the conflict, and like her, he carried the weight of every fallen soul. Did we do the right thing? Aiden's voice was low, hesitant. I keep thinking about all the lives we lost, all of them. What did we really gain? Olivia turned to face him, her gaze steady, though her heart was heavy. We saved countless more by stopping a war, Aiden. We saved the future. But what kind of future is it? He asked, his tone heavy with doubt. We stopped a war, but we've opened the door to something else. What if we can't control this power we've just inherited? Olivia didn't answer immediately. Her eyes moved over the faces of the fallen, faces she knew, faces she would never forget. The Zilthar, for all their wisdom, were still distant. Their respect for humanity's resilience was clear, but they remained cautious. Despite their assistance in the war, the gulf of distrust was not easily bridged. The future is uncertain, Olivia said, her voice stronger than she felt. But we have the chance to shape it, to use this power wisely. Aiden stared at the wall for a moment longer, his face conflicted. I hope you're right. As she walked through the corridors of the command center later that night, Captain Vale's mind drifted back to the pivotal moments of the past weeks. The delicate dance of diplomacy, the crushing weight of responsibility, and the overwhelming question, had she made the right calls? The Zilthar had helped, yes, but they hadn't shared the full extent of their technology with humanity. They had offered a hand, but they'd also kept a distance, something Olivia understood more than ever. She thought of Kalos, the Zilthar ambassador, and the subtle caution in his eyes. He had seen humanity's potential, but he had also seen the chaos, the destruction they could bring. He had seen them fear the unknown, even when it was extended in peace. She paused by the viewport, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. The quiet hum of the station around her was almost soothing, but it didn't ease the burden she carried. There was no denying the truth. Humanity was at the precipice of something far greater than they'd ever imagined. But that power, that potential, also posed the greatest threat to their future. She remembered a conversation with Kalos earlier that day, a quiet exchange between diplomats. His words echoed in her mind. You are young, Captain Vale. Your people have just begun to understand the vastness of the galaxy. You have much to learn, and much to prove. Do not let your fear of power blind you to the responsibility it demands. It had been a simple statement, yet one that hung heavily over her like a shadow. Was humanity truly ready for the responsibility of the technology they had just inherited? She had seen what fear and misunderstanding could do, how quickly things could spiral into chaos. Would they repeat the mistakes of the past? Would they use this power for good? Or would they exploit it for domination? Vale sighed, knowing that the future was as uncertain as the stars themselves. But she couldn't allow herself to give in to fear. The future would be shaped by the choices they made now, and she was determined that humanity would not falter. Earth had gained much in the aftermath of the crisis: access to advanced Zilthar technology, a powerful tool that could help propel them to new heights. But with that power came the potential for exploitation. Already the debates had started among Earth's leaders about how best to handle this newfound strength. Some advocated for secrecy, for a cautious approach. Others, less patient, urged immediate advancement and domination. It was a delicate balancing act. Captain Vale knew that humanity had to take the long view. Power was not meant to be wielded in haste. It needed to be understood, respected, and used wisely. She stood before the council in the days that followed, listening to the voices of political leaders and military commanders, all eager to claim a piece of the alien technology. The question we face, she began, her voice cutting through the debates, is not whether we can control this technology. We can. But should we? What is the cost of its use? We've seen what happens when power is wielded without thought. I won't let humanity make that mistake. The room grew quiet. Olivia's words weighed heavily on the council, but they knew the truth in them. They had a choice to make. Would they rush forward with unrestrained ambition, or would they move carefully, with foresight and responsibility? As the days passed, a new directive was set. Earth would continue to develop the Zilthar technology, but under strict regulations. A joint human-alien council would be formed to oversee its use, with an emphasis on peace, exploration, and mutual growth. But even as the council laid the groundwork for this new age, doubts lingered. How long would the peace last? Would other factions in the galaxy seek to exploit Earth's newfound power? And more pressing still, how long would the Zilthar remain an ally? They had helped, but they had also held back. Their caution was clear, and Olivia wondered, was it truly concern for humanity's future or something else? For the first time, the question of trust was at the forefront of Olivia's mind. Humanity had earned a place in the galaxy, but had they earned the trust of the galaxy in return? Her mind raced as the future unfolded before her. The answers would come, she knew, but for now humanity's strength would be tested in ways they couldn't yet fathom. Captain Olivia Vale stood at the helm of the United Galactic Council, her gaze sweeping across the vast expanse of space through the observation deck's panoramic window. The stars shone brightly, as though inviting humanity to take its place among them. But for Vale, the brilliance of the cosmos now felt different, more like an uncharted, perilous frontier than a beacon of hope. She had been promoted. The title of captain now seemed so distant, replaced by the responsibilities of the highest order. The United Galactic Council had appointed her as an envoy, tasked with maintaining peace in a galaxy that now viewed humanity through a far more scrutinizing lens. After all, Earth had stumbled into this galactic arena, not with the tentative steps of an explorer, but with the powerful strides of a nation newly awakened to its potential. Her heart was heavy. She had been entrusted with a monumental task, one that no human before her had ever been given. But as the weight of leadership settled onto her shoulders, so too did the doubts. The Zilthar had helped, yes, but they had also been wary, keeping their distance even as they acknowledged humanity's resilience. And the Vorg? The galaxy had seen Earth's capability to resist aggression, but was humanity prepared for the deeper responsibilities of galactic politics, of interstellar peacekeeping? The promotion had been an honor, but it had also brought new fears. The technology humanity now wielded, the power to reshape not only their own destiny but that of countless others, was both a blessing and a curse. Was humanity truly ready for this responsibility? Would they rise to the challenge, or would the same impulsiveness that had nearly driven them to war cloud their judgment again? Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft chiming of an incoming communication. It was Aiden Roth, her trusted military strategist, now serving as her chief advisor in the Council's new peacekeeping division. "You've been quiet, Captain," he said, his voice calm but laced with concern. "You're thinking about the future, aren't you?" Vale leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. "The future is vast, Aiden. Too vast, maybe. We've come far, but I can't help but feel that we've only scratched the surface of what's out there. We're not just explorers anymore. We're players in a much larger game." There was a pause, then Aiden's voice softened. "The galaxy may be more dangerous than we thought, but if anyone can guide humanity through it, it's you." Vale smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Let's hope so." As the conversation ended and the channel closed, Vale turned back to the view, her eyes narrowing. Somewhere out there, in the vast and uncaring expanse of space, something stirred. A faint signal had recently been detected, a subtle anomaly in the frequencies, one that didn't match any known civilization's technology. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Someone, or something, had noticed Earth's rapid rise. The discovery of more alien artifacts, traces of a civilization older and more advanced than the Zilthar, had also raised new questions. What secrets did these artifacts hold? And more importantly, who had left them behind? The Zilthar were not the only beings in the galaxy. In fact, they had made it clear that humanity was far from the most powerful or influential species in the universe. A flicker of movement caught her eye, a shadow in the distance. It was impossible to tell if it was real or if it was just her. Mind running wild with the possibilities, but it didn't matter. The galaxy was full of unknowns, full of dangers and wonders humanity hadn't even begun to fathom. As Vale turned away from the window, she felt a strange pull, as if the universe itself was waiting for Earth to step further into the unknown. The journey had only just begun, and somewhere out there something was watching, something waiting for humanity's next move.